Same actor, different movies. So part of what makes Citizen Kane work as well as it does is it's doing so many things well. And of course, we have to start with the story. The story of Citizen Kane, even if you don't know anything about William Randolph Hearst, it really doesn't matter, because the story of Citizen Kane is the story of Charles Foster Kane, who is a man who has enormous gifts. He's incredibly bright. He's ambitious. He wants to do some good in the world with the wealth that he has been lucky enough to receive. But he's also flawed. He's incredibly flawed. And in many ways, these very strong personality traits, these complex and contradictory traits that we see combined in this one man, gives us a fascinating character study of what it's like to be gifted, but also flawed, and the consequences of these things coming together within a single life. In Citizen Kane, we see that life rendered from childhood to death. So this is a rather complete, within the space of almost 2 hours, a rather complete character study of one particular individual. And we see him in all of his contradictory glory. So this is part of the appeal of Citizen Kane. It's a very real, very nuanced, very three-dimensional portrait of a human being. But more than that, besides the story itself, part of the way in which Citizen Kane does things different, in other words, it kind of rewrites the Hollywood script, is the way the story is told. First off, the movie begins, this is no major spoiler, folks, I'm not giving anything away here. The movie begins with the death of the main character. That's a very bold move. It's a very interesting move. So we start with the main character's death. Then we get a newsreel. And of course, in the early 1940s, newsreels were something that you could expect to see when you went to see a motion picture, in addition to cartoons like the one we saw this afternoon. And within the newsreel, you see Kane's life, and you're not even 5 minutes into the movie yet, you see Kane's life in its entirety. But what you get is a very selective depiction of that life within the space of that newsreel, which incidentally is also interesting in terms of the style of the movie, because Wells imitates newsreel style, and it contrasts stylistically with the rest of the movie. But anyway, you get this depiction of this life in brief, very quickly, but then there is the mystery, Hitchcock would call it a MacGuffin. What did his last word mean? What did he mean when he said rosebud at the very end? And so what you get for the rest of the movie is this reporter on a trek to try to figure out what did he mean, but also by extension, who was Charles Foster Kane? So you get bits and pieces of this life. The story is told in fragments. It's told from different people's perspectives as they knew Kane. So just in terms of the audacity of the structure, the way the plot is put together, the way we learn about this character one little bit at a time, and we have to try to put all of these things together, this is part of the reason why so many people have admired Citizen Kane for so long. Wells also received a lot of attention, not necessarily at first, because the movie did not do all that well at the box office initially. But he eventually received a lot of attention for the style of the movie. As I mentioned, he worked with one of the major screenwriters of Hollywood, Herman Mankiewicz. He also worked with one of the major cinematographers in Hollywood at that time, a man named Greg Toland. And Toland is noteworthy in film history, not just because of the work he did on Citizen Kane, but because he was a pioneer of what was called deep focus photography. Now, what you'll notice when you watch a lot of movies is that what the filmmakers want you to focus on is in focus. And the less important parts of what you see on the screen tend not to be in focus. This is so much a convention of Hollywood movies that you even see it in a lot of animation. Even in things like Pixar films, digitally animated films will do this. What deep focus photography does is to put basically everything in focus. And so what you get is the ability to kind of layer the action within the scene. One particular example that occurs fairly early in the film that's worth noting is we're at Kane's childhood home in Colorado. His mother is speaking with this man, and they are basically arranging this boy's future. We see all of that in the foreground, and it's very clear. You would typically expect to see that type of thing in a Hollywood picture. But in the background, through the window, you see the young Charles Foster Kane out playing in the snow. And you can hear what he's saying, you can see what he's doing. It's all very deliberate. And so in many ways, multiple things are happening at the same time. And this contributes to the complexity of the story, and it enriches the experience of it. He was also, Wells was, very fond of using the camera in various ways to tell the story, not just with deep focus photography, but also he liked to use unconventional angles. He uses distance very deliberately, ranging from extreme close-up to very long shots to try to suggest things. This works in tune with the lighting, it works in turn with the sound. Wells, of course, did have a background in theater and radio, and so he's very deliberate in his use of sound. He's very interested in using sound, not just music, but also dialogue. He's one of the pioneers of having people talk all at the same time, overlapping dialogue, much like they would in everyday life. There's also a fair amount of symbolism in the movie, and I don't want to belabor this because a lot of people hear symbolism and they go, I really don't want to think about that. But he likes to use objects in a suggestive way. So for instance, the story of Citizen Kane is kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. It comes in bits and pieces. You have to try to put it together in a way. Well, at one point, his wife is a big aficionado of jigsaw puzzles. Also, notice the snow globe at the very beginning of the movie during the death scene. The snow globe is significant, as of course is Rosebud itself, herself, whatever. I'm not going to spoil that for you if you haven't seen this movie before. Now, all of this sounds, of course, incredibly clever. It's like, wow, chopping up the story in various ways and all kinds of interesting camera angles and camera lenses. It sounds very technically accomplished. And it is. It's a very technically accomplished film. But none of that, of course, would matter if the story was not interesting, if the character was not somebody we were interested in learning about. And of course, any of that would matter if the acting wasn't there, if the performances were not there. Wells, of course, is the star of the show. So he's the director, he is one of the screenwriters on this thing, and he's also the main character. And he plays Citizen Kane, he plays Charles Foster Kane from his 20s, which is the time Wells was when he made this, to Kane being an old man. He's in almost every single scene, and we see Wells playing this very complex and conflicted character in a way. He did not win the Best Acting Oscar, but it is certainly an amazing performance. This is part, again, of the reason why Citizen Kane is so often considered a major film.